director del Banco Central de la República Argentina, a quien...
Son las 8:30, buenos días a todos, empezamos en punto. Como todos saben, nuestro sistema financiero es un sistema financiero chico, transaccional. Los depósitos representan 15% del producto, los créditos al sector privado algo parecido, y esto en los últimos 15 a 20 años. Uno de los principales desafíos que tiene el Banco Central es llegar a un nivel de profundización financiera similar al que tienen otros países de la región, que superan el 50% del producto. Y hacer esto preservando la estabilidad financiera, lograr un rápido crecimiento del crédito para que prontamente las personas, las pequeñas y medianas empresas, las corporaciones puedan acceder al crédito, pero preservando la estabilidad financiera. Y aquí es donde tenemos el placer de contar con 3 expositores que pertenecen a países que ya recorrieron este camino. En el caso de España, arrancando en los 80, vamos a contar con la exposición de Luis Linde, actual gobernador del Banco de España. En el caso de Polonia, como me contaba ayer Marek, cuando yo le contaba que nuestro sistema financiero era muy chico y que esto de los 15% del crédito al sector privado, él me decía, en los 90 no teníamos sector privado. El crédito del sector privado era, por definición, cero. Con lo cual el desafío nuestro era aún mucho mayor. Y en el caso de Turquía, hoy es, Marek, creo que 90%, 90% of the GDP, ¿no? El crédito al sector privado. Y en el caso de Turquía, un país que en los últimos 10 años pasó de tener 15-20% de crédito al producto a 60 o 70 en los últimos años, con lo cual la experiencia de Turquía es muy valiosa y muy reciente. La idea es que nos cuenten entonces cómo fue este proceso, en qué momentos del crecimiento tenemos que empezar a preocuparnos por el crecimiento del crédito, qué variables tenemos que estar mirando, qué medidas macroprudenciales tomaron, normativa bancaria específica, qué acciones de supervisión bancaria pusieron en todo este recorrido. Cada expositor va a tener 20 minutos para hacer su presentación y después va a haber 10 minutos adicionales para preguntas. Empezamos entonces con Luis Linde, gobernador del Banco de España.
Muy bien, pues a todos muy buenos días. En primer lugar, muchas gracias, por supuesto, al Banco Central de la República Argentina y a su presidente por esta invitación. La verdad es que hasta ahora lo hemos pasado muy bien, tanto en sentido técnico como en sentido lúdico, de forma que en este sentido yo podré aportar poco, el último, pero en el primero intentaré aportar lo mejor que pueda, para que siga siendo una reunión interesante. Cuando recibí la convocatoria de estas jornadas, y me fijé en el título de la parte que más o menos me correspondía, que es Desarrollo Financiero con Estabilidad, pensé enseguida que eso tiene 2 posibles interpretaciones. Uno puede estar preocupado o tratando de entender bien la necesidad de que el crecimiento económico se lleve a cabo, se desarrolle con estabilidad financiera. Incluye, por supuesto, estabilidad de precios, pero es mucho más amplia que eso, ¿no? Es decir, que y tenemos más ejemplos recientes de la necesidad de que la política económica vigile también, y la política financiera vigilen la estabilidad que ahora llamamos macroprudencial. Es decir, que el desarrollo económico, el crecimiento, mantenga ciertos equilibrios básicos en el sistema financiero. Y eso es lo que ahora llamamos política macroprudencial. Esto es una de las enseñanzas básicas, todos estamos de acuerdo, me parece, de la gran crisis que hemos atravesado últimamente. Pero hay otra posible acepción, claro, de este lema de desarrollo financiero con estabilidad, que es que el desarrollo financiero consiga un sistema financiero estable, armonioso, que tanto los procedimientos de desarrollar el mercado financiero como las instituciones que van surgiendo y que actúan en el mercado financiero, los nuevos modos de financiación, que todo eso crezca de tal forma que no ponga en riesgo la propia estabilidad y el propio crecimiento del sistema. Yo creo que esto, más bien, es lo que hemos enfocado con la política microprudencial y con la política nueva de resolución. Los bancos centrales, más aún si son bancos centrales que tienen una responsabilidad de supervisión financiera, de supervisión bancaria, como es el caso del Banco de España, por ejemplo, aunque ahora sea en el marco del sistema europeo, tenemos que enfrentar todo a la vez. Tenemos que enfrentar la política microprudencial, la política macroprudencial y participar, en la medida que nos toque, en la política de resolución. Voy a intentar desarrollar, en el plazo que tengo, estas ideas apoyándome en la historia reciente financiera de España, que, como todos ustedes saben perfectamente, ha atravesado una crisis muy grave, una crisis financiera y bancaria muy grave. Yo diría que la más grave, pues para no irnos a épocas muy remotas, la más grave pues, de los últimos 50 años, ¿no? Esa es una especie de apoyo que tendré para ir explicando el tema más general de la política micro y macroprudencial, como respuestas de la autoridad monetaria a la idea esa, el objetivo de conseguir desarrollo financiero con estabilidad. En el caso de España, como es bien sabido, en 1999 se inició la Unión Monetaria, se puso en marcha, se puso en circulación el euro como la moneda de la Unión Monetaria, y lo esencial que ocurrió en ese paso fue una bajada muy sustancial de los tipos de interés. En el caso español, en otros casos, pero en el caso de España eso fue muy, muy claro. Hubo una bajada muy fuerte de los tipos de interés. Eso provocó enseguida un aumento muy importante del crédito, porque esa bajada se produjo en el mercado financiero español, pero también fue la política que siguió el BCE en esos años iniciales. De forma que la consecuencia fue que probablemente para la política monetaria que se implementó en aquellos años por parte ya del Banco Central Europeo era quizá perfectamente adecuada para algunas economías, pero para el caso de España era demasiado laxa, claramente. Pero eso es lo que ocurre cuando uno está en la Unión Monetaria, que tiene una política monetaria común y que no puede discriminar por zonas, naturalmente, ¿no? Entonces, el Banco de España, en aquellos primeros años, se enfrentó a esta situación con algunas medidas, bueno, que luego se vio que eran insuficientes, pero eran medidas que tenían cierta, digamos, originalidad. Por ejemplo, el Banco de España nunca aceptó que el riesgo contenido, el riesgo descargado en los vehículos estructurados saliese de los balances bancarios, que era la norma común en otros muchos países desarrollados. De forma que España, con esa decisión del Banco de España de evitar que el riesgo descargado en vehículos especiales saliese del balance bancario, se salvó de la primera crisis. Nuestro sistema bancario estuvo muy poco afectado por la crisis del subprime. Realmente, de esa crisis, nuestro sistema bancario salió relativamente bien. Digo relativamente porque no del todo bien, pero en fin, superó esa crisis en parte debido a esta excepción contable, a esta excepción de riesgo que el Banco de España impuso a la banca, no sin alguna dificultad. Pero lo más importante que hizo el Banco de España en esa situación de enorme aumento del crédito, que ahora me referiré a eso porque en España sufrimos una verdadera burbuja crediticia, fue algo que seguro que muchos de ustedes conocen perfectamente, son las llamadas provisiones dinámicas o estadísticas o contracíclicas. ¿Eso qué era? Pues, contado muy simplemente, esa fue una idea que tuvo el Banco de España a finales de los 90, es decir, los años previos a la puesta en marcha de la Unión Monetaria, y la idea es muy simple, la idea es aplicar una técnica actuarial al riesgo bancario, es decir, pensar que cuando hay posibilidad de que haya un gran aumento del crédito, lo que conviene es tener en cuenta los riesgos que uno puede prever, no los riesgos que efectivamente ya se han materializado en pérdidas realizadas, sino el riesgo, digamos, actuarial, para usar una palabra que todos entendemos, de que ese aumento del riesgo, antes o después, llevará a problemas. Y entonces, lo que eso significa es que se hacen provisiones, se exigen provisiones, no a partir de pérdidas ya realizadas, sino de pérdidas previstas o estimadas en sentido actuarial, en sentido, digamos, estadístico. Por eso se llaman provisiones estadísticas, ¿no? Bueno, estas provisiones que se pusieron en marcha, estuvieron preparándose durante 2 años, 3 años, y se pusieron en marcha a comienzo de este siglo. Estas provisiones, yo creo que ha sido una idea importante y son, por así decir, el abuelo o el padre administrativo del actual buffer anticíclico que todos conocemos. Solo que el buffer lo que hace es aumentar capital y las provisiones eran provisiones, no capital, ¿no? Ahora entraré un momentín en esa distinción. Entonces, estas provisiones fueron difíciles de implementar, hubo complicaciones técnicas y políticas de diverso orden. El Banco de España ha publicado un libro solo sobre estas provisiones y, por supuesto, está a su disposición en español y en inglés. Y entonces, nosotros creemos que esa era una idea correcta. De hecho, esa idea ha sido recogida, insisto, a través de un buffer de capital, no de provisiones, en la nueva regulación que todos ya aceptamos a partir de la nueva Basilea y las normas del FSB. Lo que ocurre es que fue insuficiente. Cuando estalló la crisis, de verdad, la crisis como consecuencia de la segunda recesión que pasó en nuestra economía, el total de provisiones anticíclicas era, si recuerdo bien, en torno a 27.000 millones de euros. Esa provisión estaba calibrada para crisis como las que habíamos vivido antes, no una crisis de la magnitud terrible que atravesamos a partir del año 2008-2009. Es una crisis en la que se juntó, ahora voy a eso, el fin de la burbuja crediticia en el caso de España, la crisis del euro, en el cual España tenía alguna responsabilidad, pero claramente no la principal, evidentemente, y la crisis internacional que afectó a todos. De forma que las provisiones eran una buena idea, pero estaban calibradas para una situación de crisis, digamos, normal, no de crisis dramática como la que atravesamos. De forma que esos 27.000 millones de euros de provisiones fueron muy útiles para enfrentar la primera parte de la crisis, pero claro, no la segunda. La segunda ya fueron enteramente insuficientes. La idea de provisiones anticíclicas está muy ligada a la contabilidad, a las normas de contabilidad de activos financieros, porque claro, si uno aplica una contabilidad que solo tiene en cuenta pérdidas ya realizadas, la norma de provisiones anticíclicas es imposible, porque está toda basada en una idea actuarial, una idea de previsión actuarial o estadística de futuras falencias en los créditos y, por consiguiente, de futuras necesidades de provisiones. De forma que había una relación directa entre la norma de contabilidad aplicada y la realidad y la aplicación de estas provisiones. De hecho, esa era una de las grandes dificultades para que la idea de la provisión anticíclica se aceptase internacionalmente. Esa dificultad ha desaparecido porque, como saben, la nueva regulación contable internacional de activos financieros, que entra en vigor dentro de unos meses, ya prevé perfectamente la posibilidad de estimar falencias y necesidad de provisiones futuras en pérdidas aún no realizadas. Como anécdota, yo diré simplemente que que la implantación de esta norma fue muy difícil, tanto internamente como externamente. Nuestra banca decía que eso les introducía en una desventaja competitiva muy grave. Había otras jurisdicciones y entidades internacionales que no aceptaban esta digamos, regularidad en la previsión de futuras pérdidas aún no realizadas. En fin, eso todo planteó dificultades, pero yo creo que ahora ya nadie discute que efectivamente la idea de las previsiones anticíclicas actuariales, por así decir, basada en previsión de futuras pérdidas, es una idea aceptable, una idea correcta y, de hecho, se ha recogido en el buffer anticíclico, que a todos aplicamos. Pero nuestra crisis, ¿por qué fue, digamos, qué factores se conjugaron para el colapso financiero que padeció España entre el año 11 y el año 13? Pues yo creo que puede decirse que, aparte de la crisis del euro, la cual nuestra responsabilidad pues, era limitada, y la crisis internacional, España había atravesado entre el año 2002 y 2008 lo que es la construcción de una auténtica burbuja crediticia de enorme tamaño, ¿no? Durante, no recuerdo exactamente, durante un buen número de trimestres, el crédito, tanto el total crédito al sector privado como el crédito a promotores inmobiliarios, como el crédito hipotecario, crecía a tasas por encima del 25%. De forma que realmente, pues, no sé, entre el año 2001 y 2007, tengo aquí la cifra, el crédito total al sector privado en España aumentó un 220%, contra un crecimiento nominal del PIB que no llegaba al 75%. De forma que efectivamente indica que había una burbuja muy importante, ¿no? A esto se unió la crisis del euro, lo que se llamaba entonces, con un eufemismo que todo el mundo entendía, el riesgo de redenominación, es decir, el riesgo de que algunos países salieran del euro, evidentemente. Y luego, también tener en cuenta que España, es un factor que hay que tener en cuenta para entender lo que pasó, entre el año 2000 y 2007 registró una afluencia de inmigrantes de una magnitud desconocida. Si se inventa una nueva magnitud demográfica que consiste en volumen de inmigración por unidad de tiempo, España recibió entre 2000 y 2007 5 millones de inmigrantes. No creo que ningún país de Europa haya recibido en tan poco tiempo tal cantidad de inmigrantes. Eso, claro, provocó un enorme boom de consumo, un enorme boom en la economía, y eso contribuyó, por supuesto, a la crisis y a la burbuja. Y esto era un factor que se iba, digamos, autoalimentando. De forma que en esa explosión y en esa crisis que nosotros padecimos, se conjugaron factores de la crisis internacional, la crisis del euro, la burbuja y esa alimentación a partir de una enorme inmigración, realmente de un tamaño enorme, en esos 5 o 6 años. Pero digamos, nuestro enfrentamiento a la burbuja y a la crisis no solo fue esta norma especial en relación a cómo se contabilizan los riesgos de los vehículos especiales o las provisiones anticíclicas, también hubo nuevos marcos analíticos y nuevos requerimientos de capital. Los marcos analíticos son, por ejemplo, las pruebas de resistencia, que antes no se hacían, en España esto no se hacía nunca, y esto se empezó a aplicar pues hace 4 o 5 años, no más, y los modelos de alerta temprana, que es esos mapas tan curiosos llenos de colorines que a veces vemos en los informes, que indican, esos son representaciones gráficas y coloreadas de los modelos de alerta temprana. Antes me he referido a la discusión entre si este problema, porque al final, para resumir y llevar la cosa a su esencia, ¿cuál es el riesgo, digamos, de inestabilidad básico? El riesgo de inestabilidad básico, el que siempre se produce, es el riesgo de que el crédito crezca demasiado deprisa. Eso es, al final, casi siempre llegamos a ese punto. Hay crisis que no pasan por ahí, pero básicamente yo creo que al final de lo que se trata en política macroprudencial es vigilar que el crédito no crezca demasiado deprisa. Y para eso, naturalmente, hay varios instrumentos. El instrumento, pero el básico, es la exigencia, naturalmente, de provisiones o de capital, para prever esa situación, ¿no? Hay una discusión bastante larga sobre qué es mejor, si ir vía capital o vía provisiones. Yo aquí no me voy a pronunciar, es bien sabido que el Banco de España siempre ha defendido la vía provisiones sobre la vía capital, pero sabemos que hay otros reguladores y provisores perfectamente respetables y competentes que defienden la otra vía. Entonces, esto es una cuestión abierta. Si hay que ir vía provisiones o vía capital. De hecho, la regulación internacional ha elegido ir por vía capital, que son los buffers anticíclicos, y esa es la situación en la que estamos en este momento. Bueno, yo creo que me quedan ya solo 2 minutos y medio o 3 minutos. Yo creo que aparte de todo esto que les he contado, también ha habido otra pata del enfrentamiento a la crisis, que es naturalmente lo que hace referencia a la resolución. Y lo que hace referencia a la resolución ha estado orientado básicamente a un punto, a una cuestión esencial. Ha sido el dotar a las entidades, naturalmente, de más capital, para que tengan más resistencia, y dándoles, y se han creado lo que se llama los key attributes, las condiciones clave de los regímenes de resolución de las entidades financieras. Y el famoso TLAC, el Total Loss Absorbing Capacity, que ha estado en discusión, como saben ustedes, durante años en el FSB. Todo esto está orientado a dar a las entidades financieras capacidad de resistencia para hacer frente a pérdidas, no solo por capital, sino por instrumentos que se pueden usar en momentos de resolución para evitar el uso de dinero público y para, bueno, darles cierta capacidad de supervivencia ante esas crisis. Esta es una cuestión bastante complicada, como ustedes saben, que seguro que habrá que revisitar y no reformular, pero sí revisar en los próximos años. Aparte ha habido más cosas, se han reforzado los estándares internacionales de contabilidad, se han revisado las prácticas de remuneración de directivos y consejeros de las entidades y se ha empezado a pensar en la regulación de lo que llamamos shadow banking, que es una denominación genérica meramente para aquello que hace lo que hace la banca, pero no son bancos. Entonces, se trata de conseguir que esas entidades, que en definitiva lo que hacen es negocios que podrían hacer los bancos, pero claro, lo hacen sin esa regulación y sin esa supervisión, pues no escapen a una regulación razonable de su actividad. Me quedan 46 segundos para ajustarme exactamente al tiempo. Yo creo que la enseñanza básica a mí me parece que ha sido todo lo que hace referencia a la política macroprudencial, y básicamente eso hace referencia a la necesidad de controlar el crecimiento del crédito con independencia del estado de saneamiento de las entidades individuales, porque una cosa curiosa, interesante de señalar, es que cuando estaba la crisis a punto de explotar en España, los bancos mostraban unos ratios de activos dudosos, lo que llamamos en España activos dudosos, muy bajos. No había prácticamente NPL, no había prácticamente non-performing loans, eran todos loans perfectamente performing, justo antes de estallar la crisis. De forma que lo importante es vigilar el crecimiento del crédito desordenado y excesivo y reforzar a las entidades, bien sea mediante capital, bien sea mediante provisiones, de un modo o de otro, pero hacerlas más fuertes y más capaces de resistir las conmociones que vienen y que nunca vienen como uno espera que lleguen, llegan siempre de un modo más o menos inesperado. Muchas gracias.
Ex-Gobernador del Banco Central de Polonia, ex-primer ministro también de Polonia.
Good morning. First, thank you for inviting me to this wonderful conference. Federico, I couldn't resist coming. and of course, I think it was a very good decision. This talk about the history of Polish banking sector might partially be interesting for Argentina these days. So I will try to explain why, starting from scratch in 1989, we arrived at a banking sector which is described by IMF as close to ideal. Why scratch in 1989? Well, in command economy, you didn't have commercial banks, basically. You had a monobank. The role of monobank was played by the central bank. Central bank was like a cashier of the finance ministry. At the side, we had a savings bank and a bank specialized in servicing foreign trade, but that's it. And now we have a banking sector which is a bit smaller than I told Pablo yesterday, 75% of GDP, very well capitalized, 14.5% capital adequacy ratio, 95% of it tier 1 capital, quite profitable, return on assets about 1%, now slightly going down. But what is much more important is that the leverage ratio is 9, compared with France. Okay, so we have 55 commercial banks. 2 biggest banks account for about 40% of the sector. 10 biggest banks account for about 80% of the sector. The rest are smaller niche banks specializing in servicing small business, basically. Okay, so how did it all come about? Well, in the early days of transition, in 1989, 1990, we allowed private banks to be established. So many industrious people set up banks. Think of Ukraine, Russia, early Russia. But also to help the system evolve, 9 state-owned banks were, as we used to say, spun off from the central bank. So they were created as regional banks, but told to compete nationally. And all those banks were told, go and serve the economy. Almost literally, they were told to support newly established private business. Okay, it took them about 2 years to become completely bankrupt, or to come close to bankruptcy. Irresponsibility. Think of early Russia, of early Ukraine. You set up banks not to, to earn money, to basically steal money. Sure, if you are allowed, you do this. State banks were irresponsible, and if they were told to extend credit to newly established businesses, they did it. But don't really analyzing the creditworthiness of those clients. So 2 years later, late 1991, middle 1992, we were heading into a major banking crisis with all concomitant consequences, massive loss of deposits, and basically a breakdown of the transition process that already has gained steam after 2 years. Well, fortunately, the government noticed this and prepared a remedy, which entered into force in early 1993. This was a law on bank restructuring. Well, everything that you expect happened. The banks were told to clean their balance sheets. They were helped technically, but also capital-wise. The cost of recapitalization of banks was quite modest compared, for example, to the Swedish exercise of the same period, as a matter of fact, 2.5–3% of GDP. Okay, not much by any standards of later days. The banks were transformed. They had been equipped in instruments and personnel that knew how to clean balance sheets, vindicate, all things like this. But what is most important, state banks were told that they are going to be privatized. Okay, so it was a strong message to the managers. If you behave properly, if you perform, you may be lucky and stay when the private owner comes. And this is exactly what happened. Well, it was like a miracle. The banks became rather conservative or ultra-conservative at the very beginning. But of course, they were helped by the state. What help? Not only capital strengthening, but also what the state did was creating tough regulatory and supervisory institutions. This was located in the central bank, because central bank somehow, miraculously, even after the command economy, enjoyed the reputation of being the best run, best managed institution in the economy, which remains true until today. I left the institution 1 year ago, so it's a okay. So well, regulation was obviously introduced according to international standards. Plus, as a rule, all regulations introduced in Poland were tougher than internationally acknowledged. And it remains to be the case until today. Well, what do I have in mind? Basically everything. The classification of capital, for example, or the classification of non-performing loans. If you look at the Polish statistics and you say you see 6% non-performing loans, this is completely different from what you see in West European countries. It's much less in fact. Loss provisioning was also tougher. Why? Well, because we learned a lesson from the crisis. If you let those bastards go free, in 2 years they will approach bankruptcy. So you have to be tough. Regulation is important, but even more important is the supervision. The supervision is how the regulatory rules are being implemented. And here you need a tough, even brutal practice. And this is what survived basically until today. Until today. Then, well, but it was basically about the bigger so-called state-owned banks. What to do with those myriad, tens, dozens of private banks sort of happily established in the first years of transition, and they were ailing. Well, we used the good atmosphere around Poland. Poland started to be seen as an attractive banking banking investment destination. So the central bank, okay, or its regulatory and supervisory departments, they pursued a very smart licensing policy. Okay, a Deutsche Bank wanted to come in, sure, but take over an ailing bank and pay the cost of cleaning the bank. Fortunately, the market was seen as attractive enough so that most cases of those ailing private banks from the early 90s were taken care of. We had like 1 or 2 bankruptcies altogether, and from the year 2000 until 2016, we had just 1 bankruptcy of a small cooperative bank. Well, so regulatory regime, tough, consistent supervision, smart licensing policy. What else? Louis mentioned macroprudential. Macroprudential policy became fashionable a few years ago. I mean, in the aftermath of the big financial crisis. There was no concept of macroprudential policy in the 90s and in the early 2000s in Poland. And there was no institution. So, sort of, what happened in Poland was that the macroprudential policy was introduced through the back door by microprudential regulator and supervisor. It was not really according to the law. And if the banks were more sort of arrogant and assertive, they could have protested. They never did. They never did. And in fact, macroprudential rules, without calling them macroprudential, were introduced throughout the whole period of Polish transition. Great story. Well, not really. Not really. To arrive at a system that you have now, you needed also a little bit of a luck. Okay, think of 2005. Poland is already the member of the European Union and is widely expected to join the Eurozone soon. But there is a major interest rate differential between Western Europe, and it was long before the ultra-low interest rates. But the interest rate differential between Poland and Western Europe was substantial enough for capital to flow in and become attractive to finance, well, the most vulnerable part of the credit market, which is mortgage. The banks saw that it's a folly. Really, I mean, I cannot first condemn the banks. They knew it is extremely risky. Well, the regulator saw it immediately and issued all the necessary announcements and warnings against this. But the regulator could not prohibit this kind of loans. The banks asked the politicians, please, make a legal prohibition of foreign exchange, especially mortgage loans, to unhedged borrowers. No. The politicians smelled the opportunity and said, no, we are not going to limit the freedom of the market. Let the people borrow money. Otherwise, those mortgage loans would be inaccessible for many of them. So let the things unfold. And they did unfold. Only few banks resisted. Which banks? They were owned by countries that went through a period of such happy-go-lucky borrowing. Italians, Dutch. The rest were fighting for market share and went, like herd of sheep into the cliff. Fortunately, the crisis struck in 2008. So the whole business stopped at a level that was still manageable. It was unmanageable in Hungary, for example. It was manageable in Poland. There were some other twists differing us from Hungary to our benefit, but still, this issue became the weakest spot of the Polish banking sector and could have created a real crisis if we didn't have luck. the crisis, the global crisis began earlier than it could have started. Well, what is the lesson? Even if you do everything in terms of regulation, supervision, you still have to count on politicians, on politics. Sorry, if there is no political willingness to protect stability of the banking sector, of the financial sector, you still can fail. So, is this optimistic what I'm going to what I have said? Well, it's for you to judge. Thank you.
Ahora es el turno de Erkan Kilimci, vicegobernador del Banco Central de Turquía.
Before beginning my speech, I would like to thank Bank of Argentina and Governor Stazanigar for the kind invitation and excellent hospitality. It's a great pleasure to be here presenting in front of such a distinguished audience. So I would like to organize my speech in two parts. I will give a general view on financial development with associated policy trade-offs and the role of financial stability in ensuring a healthy financial development. Then I will present some perspectives from the Turkish experience. I'm coming as a profession from investment banking, so as far as I see, central banking is a boring business. But thanks, I'm working for the Central Bank of Turkey. It's quite exciting and entertaining. So I will show you some experimental policy making in Turkish case. So I would like to highlight that financial development is a multi-dimensional concept. While it is generally related with financial debt indicators, such as total domestic credit or the size of the banking sector, there are other dimensions as well. For instance, the degree of savers' access to financial services, their ability to make informed decisions, intermediation costs, and stability of intermediation activity are also important dimensions to consider. Likewise, policies that affect the pace of financial development is multidimensional. For instance, a good record of fiscal performance would imply higher availability of funds or private capital accumulation and help financial development. Similarly, a successful monetary policy framework that ensures low and stable inflation would reduce uncertainty and make savings and investment more attractive. Legal and structural reforms are also important for the financial development since they ensure better protection and enforcement of property and creditor rights. Lastly, banking regulations fostering competition and monitoring activity, financial and trade openness that enhance knowledge spillovers as well as better corporate governance. That policies increase financial literacy may all be helpful for financial development. So financial development is vital to channel household savings into productive investments, facilitate risk sharing, better monitor borrower risk, and in turn, promote capital accumulation and growth, particularly for the case of an emerging market economy with a low savings rate. So rapid development in financial activities might signal excessive risk-taking, leaving the entire economy more vulnerable to tail events. So, while it's generally true that financial deepening opens the way for greater investment and growth opportunities, when the economy is faced with a favorable shock, a fast credit expansion can bring lax lending standards, excessive leverage, and asset price bubbles. This, in turn, implies that a negative feedback mechanism will work full force in downturns, bringing the economy further down following a negative shock and interrupting the financial deepening process. This highlights the importance of having a well-designed macroprudential framework to ensure prudent borrowing during good times. So, from an emerging market perspective, capital flows add an extra layer of complication to the problem, as capital flows often amplify the financial cycle. In particular, favorable global financial conditions and capital inflow surges may induce an amplified cycle of appreciated currency, improve balance sheets of borrowers, and easier credit conditions. On the other hand, it brings in problems such as a rise in foreign currency debt or widening in current account deficit. How to respond to these cycles? That's a crucial question. For example, particularly during early 2010s, emerging countries have undertook various policies to reduce the sensitivity of capital inflows to global financial conditions and the sensitivity of domestic credit cycles to capital inflows. The experience taught us the importance of taking these measures in a timely, well-targeted, and coordinated fashion, which I will next discuss briefly in ensuring macro-financial stability. So while significant progress has been made over the last decade in understanding the parameter and the effectiveness of macro-financial stability tools, there remains a couple of key issues yet to be resolved. So one of them is formulation. Embedding the policy measures in conventional macroeconomic stabilization frameworks is challenging, since systemic risks occasionally build up and lead to financial turbulences, and it's often challenging to identify the exact source of externalities or risks that eventually would call for policy actions. Assessment or lack of high-quality historical data makes it complicated to identify the problems in a multiple tool environment. Challenges regarding the assessment of these policies. And it's also likely that risks may not vanish, but spread to other segments of the financial system. So the likelihood of leakages then requires a careful implementation of macroprudential policies and willingness to recalibrate them if needed. And it is quite challenging to communicate the aim and the parameter of new tools, as well as to provide a roadmap for the use of these tools over the medium term. Lastly, achieving multiple targets and resulting policy trade-offs usually require an effective coordination between policymakers. Let me draw some perspectives from the Turkish experience. Turkey has intensively deployed macroprudential instruments in recent years. I believe this experience may shed light on how to approach complex policy trade-offs, as I mentioned. So, the seeds of rapid financial deepening was sown after 2001. Turkey experienced one of its worst financial crises in 2001, after which deep-seated structural reforms were undertaken. Following the careful macroeconomic management process, we have observed a consistent increase in financial deepening in Turkey, as evidenced with the rapid credit growth, with the domestic credit stock to GDP reaching about 70% in 2016. The pace of financial deepening in Turkey has been remarkable from a cross-country perspective as well. Financial debt has increased at a pace faster than emerging markets average throughout the 2000s and eventually has surpassed the emerging markets average in 2015. Let me briefly mention the structural reforms implemented after 2001 crisis. First, a new monetary and exchange rate policy framework was adopted. Exchange rate was allowed to float in order to avoid excessive buildup of FX-related risks that would occur in a fixed float exchange rate regime. The central banking law has been augmented, giving the central bank operational independency and other necessary ingredients with an explicit mandate of achieving and maintaining price stability. Second, a major banking sector reform was carried out. State banks were recapitalized and restructured. A separate entity named Banking Regulation and Supervision Agency was formed for more effective microprudential monitoring and regulation. There has also been public sector reforms, ranging from having a more effective social security system and reforms to enhancing market competition. Lastly, fiscal discipline was a given strong emphasis. In sum, these structural reforms, strong fiscal discipline, and price stability-oriented monetary policy have all been instrumental in achieving a consistent decline in sovereign risk premium. Such reforms have also been vital in decreasing real borrowing costs and facilitating the financial deepening process in Turkey. The financial deepening has continued almost uninterruptedly during the last 15 years. There are many different aspects of the process, but given my limited time today, I would like to highlight a specific period, the years 2009 and 10, during which we experienced large amount of capital flows due to the quantitative easing policies that called for decisive policy action. Together with accelerating capital flows in 2009 and 2010, we have observed a rapid growth in credit and a sustained appreciation in the currency. Moreover, current account balance deteriorated significantly, and it was financed mainly by short-term portfolio inflows. In short, the economy at the time was in a strong need of soft landing. On the challenging side, however, there were no institutions explicitly responsible for containing systemic or macrofinancial risks. The Banking Regulation and Supervision Agency, the banking watchdog, was mostly on the micro-regulation side, with limited emphasis on macro-financial risks. Looking from the regulator's micro perspective, there was no sense of urgency to respond to the rapid loan growth. Bank balance sheets looked healthy, profitability was high, capital and liquidity positions were accommodative, and non-performing loans were low. However, from a macro point of view, the situation looked far more concerning and urgent. How can financial stability be achieved? So starting from late 2010, we augmented our inflation targeting framework with financial stability as a complementary objective. From April 2016, we then strengthened our focus on the price stability with a particular emphasis on structural issues and policy coordination that I will elaborate later. As I mentioned, while the Central Bank of Turkey took a leading role at the end of 2010 to contain macrofinancial risks, a formal macroprudential perspective was lacking. The foundation of the Financial Stability Committee in June 2011 was a major step towards establishing a formal macroprudential framework. Chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister in charge of economy, the Financial Stability Committee brings together all the major relevant institutions for financial stability. This committee helps to improve information sharing, coordination and cooperation between the parties in assessing the systemic risks. Although the committee doesn't have its own tools, each institution has its own mandate and responsibility, and in this sense, the power and the tool rest with the relevant authorities. The committee have further extended the central bank's previous efforts to contain the adverse impact of global liquidity cycles on the domestic economy that manifests itself on rapid growth, credit growth, and the quality of bank liabilities. So in particular, we can state three distinctive phases of macroprudential policy measures. The first two rounds were tightening phases, ranging from raising risk weights and provisions on consumer loans and loan-to-value caps for housing or vehicle loans to maturity restrictions. The last round was phased in at the end of 2016 to ease credit market conditions to avoid a possible credit crunch and a slowdown in economic activity. So were these policies helpful in smoothing the credit cycle? The graph presents some stark evidence on this front. The upward trend in credit growth, or you may call them the accelerated financial cycle, was broken with the tightening macroprudential policy phases in 2011 and 2013 and 14. Moreover, as intended, the effect of macroprudential policies were more pronounced on consumer credit growth. Lastly, being hit by concurrent shocks, especially since the mid-2016, which led to a slowdown in capital flows and the contraction in economic activity, the easing round occurred, which has provided support to the supply of credit. Moreover, thanks to the macroprudential policy framework, the substantial financial deepening over the last 2 decades, banks were kept well capitalized and liquid. So additionally, banking sector in Turkey has had low and relatively stable non-performing loan ratios. Another instrument which have been deployed after 2010 is the differential use of reserve requirements. In particular, reserve requirement ratios have been successively raised to contain credit growth. In order to ensure prudence by banks in several dimensions, we have also made well-targeted use of reserve requirement ratios by using different rates for Turkish lira FX, core and non-core liabilities. On the back of the challenges introduced in reserve requirements in early 2015, banks have been more eager to roll over their medium and long-term terms rather than their short-term debts. In return, the weighted average maturity of the external sector, external debt started to extend immediately after implementing the policy. The macroprudential policy framework appeared to be successful in containing the financial cycle, as demonstrated by the weakened fluctuations in capital flows, exchange rate, and credit growth. This was particularly important to dampen the magnitude of the financial cycles triggered by external flows. Lastly, we observed that macro financial stability tools have increased the resilience of Turkish economy by reducing the sensitivity of domestic financial conditions to global factors. As shown in a recent study by Central Bank of Turkey, the contribution of global factors to explain Turkey's financial conditions have declined after the implementation of such tools. So to conclude, I would like to emphasize that a well-targeted and coordinated financial stability policy framework is essential for the healthy pace of financial development. Central banks can contribute to this endeavor by deploying necessary tools at their disposal, helping to formulate well-targeted policies that directly address the structural issues and facilitating coordination between the relevant parties. While doing so, price stability should continue to be the main priority for the central bank. And let me conclude by briefly how these principles have guided our policy approach in practice. In the past year, we have taken several additional initiatives to address structural impediments to disinflation. We have been working jointly with other relevant institutions on 3 additional issues to further ease the policy trade-offs and pave the way for price stability while safeguarding the financial stability. The first dimension is to enhance fiscal monetary policy coordination. The second one is to contain excessive volatility in food prices. And the last one is a new project through the Financial Stability Committee to mitigate the risks emanating from corporate FX borrowings. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Erkan. Thank you, Erkan. Y ahora tenemos unos minutos para hacer preguntas a los speakers. Federico.
I want to thank the 3 speakers for great presentations. We've learned a lot. My question is going to be for Marek and Erkan, and has to do with the relationship between financial development and disinflation. As the financial sector increases, it's like your money multipliers are increasing significantly. And I want to know if that was at some point a concern in economies which were actually achieving disinflation at the same time. So if there was a relationship between the growth of higher monetary aggregates and the disinflation process.
If you, can you hear me? Okay. There was one significant episode of disinflation in the Polish history of the last 25, 27 years. I think it was very similar to the Peruvian experience. Remember the graph that Julio presented to us? Around the year 2000, there was a big disinflation from 30–40% down to almost 0. And then both core and headline inflation indexes just fluctuate around 2%, 3%. This is exactly the same what happened in Poland. We really had one major episode of disinflation. This was after 98, 99, when we announced inflation targeting. Before, we tried something that we now call eclectic monetary policy. If you follow news or have followed news from post-communist countries at that time, Poland is associated with the so-called Big Bang. The Big Bang was there, but not concerning inflation. We thought that exchange rate policy should serve a certain softener of hard budget constraints for domestic companies open to international competition. So we used to have something which now is called the crawling peg or crawling band, really feeding inflation or decelerating inflation only very gradually. And then the newly established Monetary Policy Council introduced ultra-tough monetary policy. They decided to run down inflation from around 10% to 2%, 2.5% in a matter of a year or two to break the inflation expectations. You know, at that time I happened to be Minister of Finance, so and those bastards in the Monetary Policy Council were either my students or my teachers. So you can, it was really a feud in the family. However, you know, it brought about a major social cost, 21% unemployment. Okay, but the disinflation occurred, and inflation stabilized at close to 2.5% for the rest of the period until now. Okay, now what happened in the financial sector? This was a nascent financial sector. The banks started at that time to fight. I mean, they felt mature enough. They started fighting for market share. So there was a huge expansion of credit opportunities, so to say. Well, it only made disinflation tougher, because it required even higher interest rates, and the social cost of it was even higher. So this was a coincidence, but really made both disinflation and the creation of sort of a leap forward in the banks or banking sector's consolidated balance sheet more difficult. So in our experience, it coincided, it made it more difficult to disinflate.
So in Turkish case, for sure, the financial deepening, especially the increase in the consumer loans, affected the aggregate demand, and as a result we have seen inflationary pressures building up. At that time, the coordination was so crucial that the fiscal discipline helped to balance the negative effect of these inflationary pressures. So balanced credit growth has been one of the major topics in the Financial Stability Committee, which resulted with a deep understanding of macro-prudential policy framework. In fact, one other thing which was especially caused by accelerated financial deepening was that the domestic financial conditions have been so much linked to global risk sentiment. So still it's a challenging issue for us, and we see it especially at the times when the monetary policy normalization signal has been given in US, and still there's a ongoing risk of unwinding the balance sheets, and it may be a source of volatility in global financial markets. So what needs to be done? That's the crucial question. In such an environment, economic resilience becomes more important than ever. The most straightforward way to contribute to the economic resilience for the country, for a central bank, is to achieve price stability. And if the long-term expectations are well anchored, especially in our country, the exchange rate pass-through is high, then the impact of the depreciation in the currency would be lower, and there will be room to smooth business cycle fluctuations. So we especially monitor the credit growth, and we want it to be balanced and orderly, which is very important to reach our mandate.
I would also like to address my question to Marek and Erkan. They're both, Poland was more dollarized at one point, and of course foreign currency is also a big issue in Turkey. If you could comment to some of the challenges you've encountered with a high degree of dollarization.
Well, indeed, in the 70s or in the 80s, the economy was dollarized to a very high extent, and the manifestation of this was also the existence of multiple exchange rates in the economy. So there was an official exchange rate, some of them, and a free market exchange rate. Free market exchange rate was for consumers, for households, and it was exorbitantly high. I mean, the dollar was exorbitantly expensive in terms of domestic currency. So the people would save, of course, in dollars. Larger transactions were in dollars. The expectation was that it would continue. Well, again, we had the Big Bang in 1989, or to be precise, on the 1st of January 1990. Part of the Big Bang was the fixing dollar exchange rate at a pretty high level and keeping it fixed for 17 months, even if the so-called transformation inflation reached 100% in the first year and something like 60% next year, due to relative prices being put in order. So controlled prices were liberalized. Well, this was a big blow to the patterns of behavior of the people. Suddenly, the people who had savings in dollars lost like 60, 70% of their savings. This was a huge sort of confiscatory move. And the dollar lost its flair just overnight. Well, not maybe overnight, but in a year. The people started looking at dollar not as a stable currency. In terms of purchasing power, dollar lost in Poland like 80% in the first 2 years. So the dollarization sort of became unattractive. People turned into zloty. There was no alternative. Other currencies didn't exist. Well, Deutschmark, maybe. But so the dollarization was killed in Poland by one very brutal move in the form of fixing the dollar exchange rate in the period of high, although reducing, falling inflation rate. So you have confiscated the dollars, simply. And this was the end of dollarization. The people lost confidence in dollars. As simple as that. Brutal. But now, in 2008, there was an episode of weakening zloty against the euro, against all currencies. Well, instead of 4-1, the zloty-euro exchange rate crept up to something like 4.8. Well, in the old days, we would have a run towards currencies, towards euro, mainly. Not in Poland. Well, the people realized, okay, this is the best moment to realize capital gains. So whatever dollar or euro accounts they had, they exchanged into zlotys, helping the zloty coming back to 4, which is still there, 4.2. So, it sounds brutally, but if you have to change expectations, I mean, you have to use the baseball bat.
In Turkey, we can talk about like 44% of all deposits are in foreign currency. So it's a dollarized economy. And there are reasons why the economy is so dollarized. First of all, long years of high inflation and political instability caused the citizens to prefer foreign currency. And after the central bank implemented inflation targeting, we have seen a round of de-dollarization. But then, with the expansionary policies of advanced central banks, we have seen a second round of dollarization. And this was caused especially because of using dollar as a funding currency. As from BIS, Shin calls it corporate carry trade, the idea was to invest in the local assets with a cheap currency, which has caused a huge, it was a huge barrier for the central bank to reach its mandate. So in the last couple of years, we put some additional emphasis on the de-dollarization and risk management of foreign currency debt. So in Turkey, we are talking about high foreign currency indebtedness, and this poses a huge risk to the economy. It's one of the vulnerabilities. And likewise, the central bank, which holds a liquidity buffer as a insurance for the rest of the economy, also the Turkish people now prefers the foreign currency deposits as an insurance against potential vulnerabilities in the economy. So what needs to be done, which we are working right now, to find a structural solution to this FX risk. We are not that brutal, so we have to be market friendly, because Turkish economy is as a country with savings deficit, so needs to be open to capital and long-term investments. So we are trying to show and be a guide to the real sector how to manage their own risks, and try to collect data from the real sector to understand how balance sheets are exposed to foreign currency risks. So that is one of the items that we are intensively working nowadays.
Pregunta de Demian, porque ya estamos en horario.
Perfecto, una pregunta cortita para Luis, por favor. En Argentina, el Banco Central ha introducido recientemente cambios regulatorios, en particular a los créditos hipotecarios que ahora pueden ser ajustados por inflación, y esto ha permitido una expansión muy fuerte, que era precisamente lo que buscábamos, de prácticamente cero a un crecimiento muy rápido del mercado de créditos hipotecarios y un consecuente boom en el sector de la construcción. En la experiencia de España, ¿qué cosas tenemos que pensar como para que este proceso, que es exactamente lo que buscábamos, este proceso exitoso en un principio, llegue a un final feliz sin ningún tipo de sobresalto?
cuando se estudia la burbuja en España, el componente hipotecario fue fundamental, por supuesto, ¿no? En realidad, aún fue más importante el componente de promotores inmobiliarios, pero muy importante, ¿no? Entonces, ahí había un curioso problema microprudencial, que es que cuando tienes un crecimiento tan rápido como el que ocurrió entonces, que creo que está aún lejos de llegar a ese punto peligroso, me parece, porque además en nuestro caso duró muchos trimestres, duró varios años, ¿no?, ese crecimiento tan rápido. Curiosamente, había a la vez, naturalmente, un incremento rapidísimo y enorme de los precios de los activos inmobiliarios. Claro, y eso hacía que cualquier loan to value, cualquier proporción que se estableciese, quedaba obsoleta a cabo de pocos meses, ¿no? Es decir, que por supuesto que la vigilancia del loan to value es algo que hay que atender, ¿no? Pero puede no ser suficiente si el movimiento es muy violento, porque el mismo crecimiento rapidísimo de los precios deja obsoleto esa proporción, sea la que sea prácticamente, ¿no? Entonces hay que ir a otras medidas, ¿no? Y pueden buscarse efectivamente entonces métodos microprudenciales para controlar ese movimiento. Pero yo creo que si el movimiento es muy violento, esa es nuestra experiencia, hay que ir a medidas que llamamos macroprudenciales. Es decir, ¿en qué se diferencia una medida macro de una medida microprudencial? Pues es muy sencillo de explicar. Una medida macroprudencial se toma sin tener en cuenta, aunque los ratios de solvencia y los ratios micros sean muy buenos, se toma en todo caso porque se espera que esos ratios pueden variar en función de la misma evolución del conjunto del sistema, ¿no? Es decir, que el buffer ahora contracíclico que existe o nuestras previsiones anticíclicas se imponían incluso en bancos que tenían unos ratios loan to value, unos ratios perfectamente aceptables y unos activos dudosos, unos activos, digamos, unos NPLs muy bajos. No se hacía caso a eso. Por eso antes he insistido en que es una aproximación actuarial, es una aproximación estadística, no microprudencial de cantidades efectivamente mantenidas en un momento determinado, ¿no? Entonces, para terminar, yo creo que el enfoque microprudencial es, por supuesto, necesario en todo caso, y eso hay que atenderlo con mucho cuidado, y es otra cosa que en nuestro caso no se hizo, ¿no? Pero además, si el movimiento es muy violento, hay que pensar en otras cosas que son un poco independientes del aspecto microprudencial.
Bueno, terminamos así el bloque. Agradecemos a todos los expositores por visitarnos, por compartir sus experiencias con nosotros, y los despedimos con un aplauso.
Ahora vamos a realizar un breve corte, vamos a compartir un café que se va a servir.